Okay, I think let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining. Good morning, and thanks for being us with us today. We are really excited for this session on BIX, AI that thinks like CISO. Now, let's be honest, AI is everywhere right now, and every tool says AI powered, and every feature says AI powered. And we all know that it doesn't mean much unless this really the tool or feature makes us like real decisions, right? So that's what today is all about. And to do that, we've got two people who have got this right at the center of building it. Gaurav Banga, founder and CEO of Balbix, and Vinay Sridhara, our CTO. So before we begin, some housekeeping. If you have any question during the conversation, please feel free to post them in the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel, and we'll take up those questions toward the end. Now, with that, let's get into it. Gaurav, over to you.
All right. Jagdish, I know I want to echo what you just said. Welcome everybody to this session, and we are going to. Jagdish, I know we prepared a slide for this. One cartoon that I want to put up over here.
Yes, can you all see it?
Yeah, it's in the wrong mode.
Yes. Sorry, there's some problem with the screen share.
So, when we kind of look at this whole business of AI, and on one side, it seems that the possibility of doing a lot of different things is so much, right? It's so much like when you use ChatGPT, it helps you with so many different things, and at the same point of time, when you try to get to this piece of what is it that is the day in the life of a CISO? Like, so Jagdish, can we just go to slide 2 and we'll stay there? All right. One of the things that we've seen with Balbix customers is that being a CISO or being in the security leadership is not easy, right? You are simultaneously getting signals from the outside, from the inside, and from the top, right? Your bosses, the business, the CFO, the board, they're asking for, your regulators, they're all asking for stuff. And at the, on a daily, hourly basis, weekly basis, you have to decide what to do and what not to do, what to focus on, what to adjust, what not to adjust. Right. So when we talk about, um, you know, what is the holy grail for AI for us, um, this is the problem that we're talking about. Right? And over the years, as we've been working on building out our platform, we've gained a few insights on what some of the hardest challenges are and what they're not. So uh, Vinay, our CTO, has been at the forefront of this. And what I'd like to, Vinay, maybe we can talk about some of the different strategies. Or no, before we get to strategies, let's just talk about some of the craziest things that you've heard about in terms of dealing with internal signals, that and external signals, and the kind of the thing that you and I talk about, which is the gradient between the velocity of these signals.
Yeah, absolutely right. The everyday morning, pretty much everyday morning, right? When you wake up, there is no dearth of exciting or, on the other words, after a few days, non-exciting things that are actually happening on the web, right? And then you get asked these questions. Hey, there is a new CISA vulnerability that is actually coming out. Hey, there is a new ransomware that is out there. And oh, there is this breach that happened. How are we actually, are we going to be affected by that? Uh, is this third party going to affect us? Is something going to change in our cyber insurance, right? I went all the way from like some of the most tactical things about a specific vulnerability to a very high level question of like, okay, how is this going to affect us financially? And This is the kind of questions that most of our customers, when I discuss with them, have. All of them are hard questions from the perspective that things are changing super fast outside. The measurements internally are done using traditional mechanisms such as like, okay, what is my adherence to SLA, which are like very slow moving signals. The information that is actually gathered internally to address some of these questions are slow to come by because there is a lot of analysis that needs to actually get done by hand. And then when you have to actually report them, they come as like spikes, essentially disrupting everything that you and your team are actually doing on a daily basis. Now, compound all of these problems, and this is essentially the crux that we hear on a daily basis. The craziest things that we have actually heard is I'm going to go back to the infamous one, which is the log4j. We have 120,000 instances of log4j. It is going to take me like 3 months to resolve them. How do I reduce my risk? How do I know what am I affected? What is it that I need to do first? Not easy questions. And you need the answers for these in hours, if not like minutes, so that you can mobilize your team to do the right thing. Same happened with Spring for Shell, right? And same happened with the Palo Alto related vulnerabilities. So how do you deal with them? And how do you deal with them in a nimble manner? And how do you deal with them in a highest ROI manner? That's how I can actually put this as a crux of like what is going on.
So Vinay, like if you look at a strategy that a Gen AI powered strategy um, to like, let's say I want to have Chat GPT help me answer these questions. I mean, you raised a sort of profound questions over here, right? And they're not just profound, they're also all over the place. There's some of them are about very specific details and some of them are about very high level things, right?
Yep.
And you wanted to solve them Chat GPT style, right? Uh, can't we just use MCP and give all of our, we can MCP the vulnerability management tool, we can MCP the tool EDR, and we can MCP Wiz all back to ChatGPT, and then we can start asking questions. Will that not work?
Uh, that's a great question. And I wish I can actually say yes. All our lives would be actually a little more simpler, but prohibitively expensive, right? So there are many aspects to this, right? Like if you go ask ChatGPT today, how am I affected by this particular vulnerability? How am I affected by this? What is the overall risk for this, from this to my organization? You are going to get an answer that is going to take you on a very, very scenic route, and you're not going to get anything out of it, right? Long, winded answers, nothing specific, overwhelming information. The key here, Gaurav, is that what does it actually mean from your environmental context standpoint? Yes, MCPs are like great words, and it's important. I mean, like, we all like protocols, but at the end of the day, how do you interact with all of these things? How do you deduplicate? How do you correlate? How do you contextualize this information? Store this information in a structured manner so that you give the power to your LLMs to answer the questions by pulling in the information from outside, correlating it with the contextual information for with your environment, the type of your industry, and answer the specific question in a manner that can actually be actionable and also reportable at the same time. I can assure you with 100% certainty that none of the foundational models, as it is that they exist today, will not be able to answer. This is where we need structured AI plus agentic frameworks to answer the questions that are actually meaningful, contextual, and actionable.
Right. So what you're really saying is that ChatGPT does not have the information, and if you just connect this information via MCP into ChatGPT, then that's not enough because it's unclear to ChatGPT which information is more relevant versus less relevant, and how to reconcile between information that is more accurate or less accurate or conflicting. Right? We all know this, right? Sometimes one tool will say a system has these attributes, and another tool will say a system has somewhat different attributes, and it's not as if you can ask one tool for the answer or the other tool for the answer. You will need to put them whole thing together.
Yeah.
Unify, correlate, deduplicate, all of those things have to happen. And ChatGPT or Claude or Anthropic, any of Anthropic's models, including Claude, they can put the data together, um, aggregate the data together in theory if you have MCP, but they can't reason about it in the form of deduplication, correlation, unification.
Yeah. And think about the scale of the data, right? For a small organization, a few tens of hundreds of gigabytes to a large organization, like hundreds of terabytes, half a petabyte of information. I mean, what will a foundational model do without a structured information that is actually flowing in the form of like key context so that it can actually make the right decision and present the right information. The data is extensive if you have to do the right thing.
Right. So if you go back to the concept of a CISO who has certain questions that need to be answered quickly every day, and also they need to be answered with some objective in mind,
Mhm.
right? And the objective is, um, sometimes it's a compliance objective, sometimes it's the objective of dealing with certain things that might impact the business, and other third kind of objective that people run into are things like efficiency, right? I mean, coverage, metrics, those kind of things, right? Things that are related to productivity and effectiveness and efficiency. So those are the three classes, right? Compliance and can you walk us a little bit through? Um, let's start with a very specific customer example, right?
Yep.
From what the conversation that we've had with our customers. Can you walk us through, simple compliance example, like which might a CISO might have in mind, right? And I'll make things PCI compliance. Right? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So if we let's take the specific example of PCI compliance, right? Like the first thing that needs to happen is, or the question that actually comes up is, hey, am I compliant? Very simple question, right? And then that question actually transforms into, where am I not compliant? And then that question translates into, what does this mean in terms of like risk, both financial and other forms of risk, right? Like we can talk about like financial risk, the risk of the breach again, which actually translates to financial. Could actually be like, what does it mean from like customer viewpoint if something were to happen. There are so many things that we need to actually think about, but the key thing here would actually be that every asset that is actually classified, does it have the context of whether this is a PCI asset or not? This information is spread out. This information is CMDB. This information is sometimes in the form of like some tags that is actually present on like different assets. This information is actually present in some spreadsheets. Now we are talking about the business context, the compliance context. We are talking about like the asset context. We are talking about the vulnerability context. And we are talking about the external context, which is essentially, is this vulnerability even related to PCI or not? Is this vulnerability critical or not? And does this actually affect an important group of assets, which is essentially the PCI that we are talking about? Now, Gaurav, going back to your thesis that you actually summarized like a few minutes back, how do you contextualize, deduplicate, aggregate, and correlate all of this information to present a view that the CISO can actually take a look and say that, okay, here is my compliance view, and here is the risk that is associated from that. And in order to actually reduce my risk by so and so, which is my appetite, what is the bare minimum set of things that I need to do immediately, and what should my strategy be going forward so that I can answer this question right away, right? And thanks for bringing up this the what we call as the brain scan of like what needs to happen within an enterprise, right? All of the things on the left hand side is the various data sources. Any large small enterprise will have most of it or at least a large subset of it, and then every node in the middle, which is essentially the white box, is a decision making correlation aggregation deduplication tool which does a structured AI to present the data in a contextual format for the Gen AI to take this and answer this question, which is, am I PCI compliant? What is my risk associated with it? And here is the agentic framework that actually answers your question in a manner that is correlating the outside information and internal information and your specific business context.
So this is kind of what we are really trying to do in a very humble way. Is we are trying to take the calculations or the reasoning that CISOs try to do in their brain, right, and outside their brain. So, for example, a CISO will need to answer a particular compliance question. They may need to text one of their colleagues and say, "Can you send me that report?" And that colleague would need to log into 3 or 4 tools and generate reports and synergize them together. And this process can take, sometimes you go and have a question and you might take days before, or sometimes even weeks before you can answer the question. So what we have really tried to do over here is try to automate to the extent possible all of this information, right? And when I say extent possible, what we've been able to achieve is a conversational asking of these questions. I'll give you a very simple example. You go into ChatGPT and say, what are my top 10 risk scenarios? You will get an answer, right? Which is non-specific. It might, ChatGPT may have from memory some idea around what company you work for. So it might be able to give you some contextualization just based on this very high level context. But ChatGPT has no idea, or Claude has no idea about your mean time to mitigate vulnerabilities or the coverage of EDR that you might have. All of those are details that are in your dashboards of your different tools. And the way you would normally answer this question is you would go to a colleague, or you would go to the dashboard yourself, and you might need to go to 3 to 4 5 6 7 dashboard, get this information, perhaps dump it into a spreadsheet, and then do some calculations, or intuitively, qualitatively come to some answer. Right? That's what we are automating with this. Right. And in the form of just being very rigorous about it and structured about it, I want to show a very short clip, which is which should be a little bit illustrative about how well this thing works. So as you were looking at the video, you probably got an idea around the yes, the kind of information that was feeding into BIX was fairly diverse. Right, some of it was cost information, some of it was process information, some of it was metrics information, Some of it was about scenarios that you have previously defined. Some of it was about scenarios that were defining in your conversation itself, right? This is all of the context that we were talking about, which you take for granted when you think in your head. But when it comes down to really expressing that in terms of conversational AI and structured AI, all that work that is happening behind the scenes to define these, remember them so you can use the word like this and that, and pull up previous plans that you have put together. That is really what is the difference between a general purpose model, a foundational model like ChatGPT and Claude, and a foundational model for cybersecurity, which is what BIX is. And obviously, inside BIX, we leverage many models, including some of the bigger foundational models. But one big other thing is that we maintain a private copy of all of these models. These are not these public models, so your data never leaves your thing. It will never be your tenant, if you will, right? It never will be used to train any of these models. It's subject to all of the typical requirements that you might have in terms of GDPR, or mandates from your banking regulators, or whatever regulation that you might be subject to.
All right, let's hit a pause for a quick minute, Gaurav and Vinay. I want to launch a quick poll. It's a 8 rapid fire questions. There are no grading, just a quick pulse check on how your team members handle all the situations. And let's take 60 seconds and answer them honestly. And if any question makes you pause or raise an eyebrow, that's kind of the point. So let's go live. Let's take a minute. Okay, that's the time. Thank you.
So we will share the results of these polls and a few other resources at the in a follow-up email after the event. One of the questions on the chat, which I want to answer at this point of time, is how does BIX protect organizational data while exploring external information in the organizational context? And that's a great question. And the way BIX does it is, obviously, in order to answer the question, sometimes you will need to reach out to external sources. So the first thing we give you is we give you control. Right? By default, all the data that you're entering is protected. We run a private copy of all the different models, and these are enterprise protected using all of the protections that we have. And if you have more questions, you can reach out to us and we can schedule a call on that topic. But none of this information is sent to the internet or to ChatGPT or Claude or any other model out that's not in protected. So that's the first line of defense. And you can choose whether or not you want which employees to see what information. So there is enterprise-based RBAC as well that is specific to specific roles that you will define, right? So you can even choose to say that so-and-so roles cannot see this information, and so-and-so roles cannot see this information. The second, there is no flow between tenants. That means we do not use your information to do any training, learning, or anything like that. It's only used for your benefit, right? Which is, there is no learning anymore. Now, the next thing, the next question comes in is, if I do want to access some information on the internet, which BIX will make it possible, there is a setting that you can turn on and off. to decide whether seamlessly internet grade, internet quality answers or internet updated answers are streamed back into Balbix or not. So you can choose to turn that setting on or off. And if you do choose to turn it on, essentially what happens is your context is anonymized. So for example, if you've been talking about specific assets and specific vulnerabilities, all of the information which is specific to your organization is anonymized as part of the query. And the context that is sent as part of the query is restricted to just what we need to answer the question. So for example, if you've been saying things like, what is the latest about this vulnerability? Right now, use the word latest. First, we will check to see how recent is our own information. Typically, that is very, very updated. But sometimes it might be behind. So, for example, you can say, "What is the latest about JIS compliance?" And you might be asking this question 1 minute after seeing a news article, and Balbix has not updated its model of the compliance framework update. So then we will very quickly say, "Okay, what is the part of the history that is necessary to answer this question?" If nothing, then we will just send in the query. We will remove all the enterprise-specific data from the query. And if something more is needed, then we will just add that little bit more context. And that is generally used when you use pronouns and you're building a filter. You might say, I am looking for these compliance query, how these new compliance standard affects my server. So we will remove the servers part of it, and we just come to the compliance standard, we'll get the updates, and then we'll recalculate it just for your server and send it back to you. All of this thing happens in then the instant of a second. The third thing we do is that we have a number of different guardrails to make sure that your users do not ask non-cybersecurity questions. Again, this is a choice. We have a broad range of definition of the business context around cybersecurity, and you can pick and choose how narrow you want this tool to be.
Yeah, I think Gaurav, you also answered the second question over here, which is how intertenant data is isolated while using BIX. So to summarize that, no data is, this is a standard procedure. There is no data that is actually shared between the tenant. And for BIX specifically, these are tenant specific and these are user specific RBAC imposed questions. So no, the RBAC is the first and the most important guardrail, and there are other LLM guardrails that have actually put in place so that there are no intertenant questions that are mingled or answered in any other way.
And it's just also not just inter-tenant, it's also within tenant. So for example, there is no way for your IT guy to discover, your CIO to discover what you've been asking. Your history is private to you. And those are the kind of guardrails we have intra-tenant. BIX is also aware of your specific objectives as a role. So for example, when you are asking questions to BIX as a CIO or CFO versus a CISO or an IT person or vulnerability management, BIX will appropriately nuance the initial level of detail. And then as you ask questions at a specific level of detail, BIX will follow through at the appropriate level of detail, so that the conversation is a little bit smoother. But I realize that we are at the past time over here. So if there are more questions and more, we are happy to take any questions. As you can just reach out to us at our website and request a meeting, and then we'll be happy to follow up and provide more discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.